This is Ethan Ross coming to you live from station WTRK, broadcasting from beneath the chaos that has consumed our city tonight. For those just tuning in, I've been documenting the criminal underworld of Metro City for 23 years, first as a newspaper reporter, then behind this microphone. What I'm about to tell you isn't speculation or rumor. It's the grim reality unfolding in our streets as we speak. The explosion you might have heard 40 minutes ago came from the warehouse district on 5th Avenue, where Victor Harlow's syndicate and Gabriel Knox's cartel have turned 6 city blocks into a war zone. This isn't another territorial dispute over drug corners or protection rackets. This is total war, and it started 3 days ago when Marcus Hale put 2 bullets in the back of Elias Trent's head outside the Riverside Casino. Elias wasn't just another soldier. He was Gabriel Knox's younger brother, the only family Knox had left in this world. I've covered both organizations since they carved up this city like a Thanksgiving turkey 7 years ago. Victor Harlow built his empire methodically, corrupting city officials, buying judges, and eliminating rivals through calculated violence. He controls everything north of Central Avenue, the docks, the pharmaceutical warehouses, and half the police precincts. His syndicate operates like a corporation, complete with accountants, lawyers, and a board of directors who happen to carry submachine guns. Gabriel Knox took a different approach to power. He fought his way up from the streets, leaving a trail of bodies that stretches back to his teenage years in juvenile detention. Knox's cartel controls the South Side through pure intimidation, protection rackets that actually break more bones than they protect, gambling operations where losing means more than money, and smuggling routes that run through the old subway tunnels. Where Harlow uses corruption, Knox uses fear. The two men have maintained an uneasy peace for 3 years, each controlling their territory while occasionally testing boundaries. But Elias Trent's murder changed everything. Knox loved his brother more than his own life, and everyone in this city knew it. Marcus Hale didn't just kill a rival gang member, he declared war on the most dangerous man in Metro City. Tonight, both armies converged on the neutral zone between their territories. My police contacts estimate over 200 armed men engaged in running battles from sunset until now. The emergency dispatch system has logged 47 separate shooting incidents, 12 explosions, and at least 23 confirmed deaths. 3 apartment buildings caught fire when someone started throwing Molotov cocktails, and the fire department can't reach them through the gunfire. I'm broadcasting from my emergency station beneath the old Metro building, equipped with enough supplies to last 2 weeks, and communication equipment that taps into every frequency in the city. 20 years ago, I built this bunker after witnessing what happened to reporters who got too close to organized crime stories. The reinforced concrete walls and steel doors have kept me safe during previous gang wars, but nothing like tonight's violence. The warehouse where this started belonged to neither organization, a deliberate choice by both sides for their final confrontation. Surveillance cameras from nearby businesses captured the initial exchange before the shooting destroyed them. Gabriel Knox arrived with 30 vehicles, while Victor Harlow brought twice that number. The meeting was supposed to negotiate Elias Trent's murder, but Knox came for blood. According to my sources inside the police department, Knox's opening words were a promise to feed Marcus Hale to rats piece by piece. Harlow responded by having his snipers open fire from surrounding rooftops. Within minutes, the warehouse district became a battlefield with automatic weapons, grenades, and enough ammunition to supply a small army. The sound of gunfire has been continuous for over 3 hours. What troubles me most isn't the violence. I've covered gang wars before. It's the systematic way both organizations prepared for total conflict. Knox emptied his weapons caches and recalled soldiers from other cities. Harlow liquidated legitimate business assets and moved his family to safe houses outside the state. These aren't men planning to negotiate or establish new boundaries. They're planning mutual annihilation. My contact at Metro General Hospital reports that emergency rooms stopped accepting new patients an hour ago. The morgue filled up before midnight, and they're storing bodies in refrigerated trucks borrowed from meat processing plants. Paramedics refuse to enter the combat zone without police escorts, and most patrol units have pulled back to defensive positions around the city's perimeter. The mayor called an emergency city council meeting at 11 tonight, but only 3 members showed up. The others either fled the city or barricaded themselves in their homes. City services have essentially collapsed in the affected areas. Power grids are failing due to damaged transformers, water mains burst from stray explosions, and telephone networks overloaded from desperate residents calling for help. Detective Jonathan Pike, one of my oldest sources in the police department, managed to reach me by radio 20 minutes ago. His voice carried exhaustion and something else, fear. Pike has worked organized crime for 15 years and never showed emotion, but tonight broke him. He described watching Knox's soldiers execute 3 Harlow Syndicate members in broad daylight, then burn their bodies in the street while civilians watched from apartment windows. The most disturbing intelligence comes from inside sources within both organizations. This war was planned months in advance, triggered by Elias Trent's murder, but built on years of accumulated hatred. Both Knox and Harlow have been stockpiling military-grade weapons, recruiting soldiers from other cities, and preparing for a conflict that would eliminate their rival completely. They're not fighting for territory or money anymore. They're fighting for the right to exist. What makes tonight different from previous gang conflicts is the involvement of civilians. In past wars, both organizations maintained strict codes about avoiding innocent casualties. That code died with Elias Trent. Knox's cartel has started targeting businesses that pay protection money to Harlow's syndicate, while Harlow's men are burning down apartment buildings where Knox's soldiers live with their families. The boundary between combatant and civilian has disappeared entirely. I've received unconfirmed reports about captured soldiers from both sides, though details remain unclear. Multiple witnesses describe Knox's men taking 15 of Harlow's soldiers alive during the warehouse battle, while Harlow's forces captured at least 8 cartel members, including Samuel Cross, Knox's chief strategist. In previous conflicts, prisoners were either executed immediately or exchanged for strategic advantage. Tonight, both sides seem to be keeping their captives for different purposes. The most chilling development involves Dr. Daniel Mercer, a disgraced biochemist who disappeared from public view 5 years ago after losing his medical license. Multiple sources confirm Mercer's presence at Harlow's northern compound, along with unusual chemical deliveries and construction of underground laboratory facilities. The timing suggests Harlow has been planning something beyond conventional warfare, though the exact nature remains unknown. As I prepare to end this broadcast, explosions continue echoing through the city streets. Gabriel Knox and Victor Harlow have unleashed forces they may no longer be able to control. What started as a personal vendetta has become something larger and more dangerous than either man anticipated. The war between these criminal organizations threatens to consume our entire city, and I fear we're witnessing only the beginning of Metro City's descent into chaos. This is Ethan Ross broadcasting from the underground on day 3 of what can only be described as Metro City's descent into hell. It's 2 in the morning, and I haven't slept since this nightmare began. What I'm about to reveal will sound impossible, but I have recordings, intercepted communications, and eyewitness testimony from sources who risked their lives to get this information to the public. The gunfire in the warehouse district ended 6 hours ago, not because the war was over, but because something far worse had begun. Victor Harlow didn't just capture Samuel Cross and 14 other Knox cartel members during the battle. He delivered them to Dr. Daniel Mercer's laboratory beneath his northern compound, where they became test subjects in an experiment that defies every principle of human decency. Let me tell you about Daniel Mercer, because understanding this man is crucial to understanding the horror he's unleashed. 15 years ago, Mercer was considered a brilliant neuroscientist working on revolutionary treatments for brain trauma and neurological disorders. His research at Metro University focused on neural regeneration and enhanced cognitive function. The medical community hailed him as a visionary who might cure Alzheimer's disease and repair spinal cord injuries. But Mercer's ambition exceeded his ethics. 5 years ago, investigators discovered he'd been conducting illegal experiments on homeless subjects, testing untested compounds that caused severe neurological damage and death. 12 people died in agony while Mercer documented their brain deterioration for his research. When the scandal broke, he lost his medical license, faced criminal charges, and disappeared before trial. The families of his victims never received justice. Victor Harlow found Mercer living under a false identity in Mexico and offered him unlimited resources to continue his research. Harlow's initial interest was practical. He wanted enhanced interrogation methods and drugs that could break even the most loyal soldiers. But Mercer saw an opportunity to pursue his true obsession, creating the perfect human weapon by manipulating brain chemistry and neural pathways. Working in a fully equipped laboratory hidden beneath Harlow's compound, Mercer spent 2 years developing what he called his masterpiece. He combined a modified strain of rabies virus with synthetic amphetamines and experimental neurotropic compounds designed to alter brain function. The resulting cocktail attacks the cerebral cortex while enhancing primitive brain regions responsible for aggression and survival instincts. The transformation process is horrifying in its efficiency. Subjects injected with Mercer's compound initially experience intense pain as the virus crosses the blood-brain barrier and begins destroying neural tissue. Within 2 hours, higher cognitive functions shut down completely. Memory, personality, and rational thought disappear, leaving only base instincts amplified to monstrous levels. The infected retain motor skills and can use simple tools, but they're driven by an overwhelming compulsion to attack and kill. Physical changes accompany the neurological transformation. Subjects become gaunt and pale as their metabolisms accelerate beyond normal limits. Blood vessels in their eyes burst from elevated blood pressure, giving them a horrifying red-eyed appearance. Pain receptors become severely dampened, allowing them to continue attacking even with fatal injuries. Most disturbing, they retain enough intelligence to open doors, climb stairs, and coordinate simple group attacks. My source inside the police department managed to intercept radio communications from Harlow's compound during the experiment. The recordings capture Mercer's clinical observations as he documented the transformation of Knox's soldiers. His voice remains emotionally detached as he describes subjects tearing at their restraints with superhuman strength, their screams gradually becoming inhuman growls and snarls. Gabriel Knox's compound occupied 8 city blocks in the South Industrial District, fortified with concrete barriers and guarded by over 100 armed soldiers. Knox had turned the area into a fortress, complete with weapons depots, communication centers, and living quarters for his extended organization. The compound represented 7 years of careful planning and millions of dollars in defensive preparations. At midnight on day 2, Victor Harlow launched his ultimate revenge. 50 of Knox's own soldiers, now transformed into Mercer's creatures, were released into their former stronghold. The attack began at the compound's eastern gate, where the infected tore through defensive positions with horrifying efficiency. Knox's remaining soldiers found themselves fighting their former comrades, but these weren't the men they'd served alongside. The infected attacked with no regard for their own safety, using whatever weapons they could find, while displaying enhanced strength and pain tolerance. Gunshots that would drop a normal person barely slowed them down. They fought until their bodies physically couldn't continue, then kept crawling forward to attack. The compound's communication center broadcast desperate pleas for help before falling silent. My police contacts recorded fragments of these transmissions, screams, gunfire, and inhuman sounds that defied description. Knox's voice appeared on the radio twice, first ordering a tactical retreat, then screaming orders that made no tactical sense as his world collapsed around him. Within 3 hours, the compound was overrun. The infected didn't just kill Knox's soldiers, they began attacking everything that moved, including each other when no other targets remained. But the horror didn't end there. The transformation process continued spreading as the creatures bit and scratched new victims. Knox's compound became a breeding ground for Mercer's nightmare creation. Emergency services received the first civilian casualty reports at 3 in the morning. A family living 6 blocks from Knox's compound called 911, screaming about bloody, violent people breaking into their apartment building. The creatures had escaped the compound and were spreading into residential neighborhoods, attacking anyone they encountered. Metro General Hospital admitted its first infected victim at 4:15. Maria Santos, a night shift nurse working the emergency ward, described the patient as a young man covered in blood with red, bulging eyes who attacked medical staff before they could treat his injuries. Hospital security subdued him, but within an hour he'd transformed completely and infected 2 orderlies before being restrained in isolation. Detective Pike radioed me at dawn with intelligence from the scene. Knox's compound was littered with bodies, but determining who died from gunfire versus the infection proved impossible. The creatures had caused such carnage that forensic investigation became meaningless. The first confirmed outbreak beyond the compound occurred at Riverside Elementary School, where 3 infected individuals attacked the overnight maintenance crew. By morning, 12 people were dead, and the school had become another infection site. City officials held an emergency meeting at 6 in the morning, but most had already begun evacuating their families from Metro City. Mayor Harrison Locke declared martial law and requested National Guard assistance, but federal authorities hesitated to deploy troops without understanding the nature of the threat. The infection shows no signs of slowing down. Each new victim becomes another weapon in an exponentially growing army of monsters. Dr. Mercer created something that spreads faster than any natural disease while maintaining the violent capabilities of trained soldiers. Victor Harlow's revenge against Gabriel Knox has become a plague that threatens to consume our entire city. As I end this broadcast, emergency radio channels report new outbreaks in 7 different neighborhoods. The creatures don't sleep, don't tire, and don't stop attacking until they're physically destroyed. Gabriel Knox's compound was just the beginning. What Victor Harlow and Daniel Mercer have unleashed cannot be contained by conventional means, and I fear we're witnessing the birth of something that will spread far beyond Metro City's borders. This is Ethan Ross reporting from beneath a city that no longer exists as we knew it. Day 5 of the outbreak, 6 in the evening, and Metro City has become something from humanity's darkest nightmares. The government evacuation sirens stopped working this morning after infected creatures mindlessly destroyed the transmission towers during their rampage through the communications district. What I'm broadcasting now may be among the last coherent reports from inside the containment zone. The military established a perimeter around our city 36 hours ago, but they're not here to rescue us. Intercepted communications from the command post reveal their true orders: prevent anything from leaving Metro City alive. The infection has spread beyond all initial projections, consuming both criminal organizations and turning our streets into hunting grounds for creatures that were once our neighbors, our families, our friends. Gabriel Knox died yesterday morning in the most fitting way imaginable for a man who lived by violence. Surveillance footage from the First National Bank building captured his final moments as he made a desperate last stand against Victor Harlow's forces while infected creatures swarmed through the streets around them. Knox had barricaded himself on the 15th floor with 8 surviving soldiers, using the building's height advantage to rain gunfire down on Harlow's convoy below. But the creatures don't understand tactics or defensive positions. They simply followed the scent of blood and the sound of gunfire, clawing their way up the building's exterior, using whatever handholds they could find. The footage shows Knox fighting with automatic weapons in each hand, screaming orders to men who were already dead or transformed. When the infected finally reached his floor through sheer persistence, Knox kept firing until his ammunition ran out, then drew a pistol and put the barrel against his own head rather than face transformation. Victor Harlow's empire crumbled when his own security forces fled rather than defend his compound against the mindless horde that descended upon them. My sources report that Harlow spent his final hours locked in his office, calling federal contacts who refused to answer their phones and begging for military extraction that never came. When the infected broke through his reinforced doors through relentless pounding, Harlow was found cowering behind his desk. The most powerful criminal in Metro City, reduced to a terrified old man. Dr. Daniel Mercer's fate carries a poetic justice that would be satisfying if his creation hadn't doomed our entire city. When the infected overran his laboratory, Mercer was caught in the middle of documenting his experiment's success. Security cameras recorded him taking detailed notes even as infected creatures pounded mindlessly on his reinforced glass observation room. His scientific arrogance prevented him from recognizing the danger until they broke through the glass and infected him while he was still holding his clipboard, turning the creator into another of his own monsters. Marcus Hale, Harlow's top enforcer and the man whose bullet started this war, met his end defending the compound's emergency exits. Witnesses describe him using explosives to collapse tunnels, preventing the infected from reaching evacuation routes, while dozens of Harlow's family members and non-combatants escaped to waiting helicopters. Hale died buying time for people to flee, perhaps finding redemption in his final moments as he faced the consequences of his actions. The transformation of Metro City's geography has been as dramatic as its population. Entire neighborhoods now exist in different states of destruction and abandonment. The financial district resembles a war zone with burned-out vehicles lining the streets and broken glass covering every surface from the mindless rampage of creatures that destroy everything in their path. Residential areas have become mazes of barricaded homes where survivors attempt to wait out the nightmare, though their food and ammunition supplies dwindle with each passing hour. Emergency services collapsed completely yesterday when infected creatures overran the central police station and 2 fire departments during their endless search for victims. The creatures seem drawn to large gatherings of people by scent and sound, making any organized response impossible. Medical facilities have been abandoned after reports of infected patients attacking medical staff and spreading the contagion through hospitals faster than any natural disease. The infected move in massive groups, not through coordination, but because they're all drawn to the same sounds and smells of human activity. Yesterday, surveillance cameras captured dozens of creatures following each other toward a shopping center where families had taken shelter, creating a horrifying parade of mindless destruction. Their sheer numbers allow them to overwhelm any defensive position through brute force rather than strategy. Communication networks throughout the city have either failed or become channels for desperate final messages. Radio frequencies carry heartbreaking transmissions from survivors making last contact with family members outside the quarantine zone. A mother in the West Side District spent 4 hours describing her children to her sister in California while infected creatures tried to break into her apartment through mindless persistence. The transmission ended with screaming and then static. Oliver Kane, the former city councilman, established what may be the largest survivor group in the downtown financial district. His radio transmissions paint a picture of medieval siege warfare as 37 people defend the Mutual Insurance Building using office furniture as barricades and kitchen knives as weapons. Kane reports that the infected attack in endless waves, drawn by the sounds of human voices and activity, but showing no tactical awareness or retreat capability. Theodore Black, a 20-year veteran of the police force, coordinates the defense of Lincoln Elementary School, where 43 people, including 16 children, have created a fortress in the gymnasium. Black's tactical experience has kept them alive longer than most survivor groups, but his radio messages reveal growing desperation. The infected pound against barriers with mindless persistence, wearing down defenses through sheer numbers rather than intelligent assault. The military's response has been catastrophically ineffective against enemies that feel no pain and show no fear. Initial attempts at containment involved armored vehicles and infantry units entering the city to establish safe zones for civilian evacuation. These operations failed within hours as infected creatures swarmed military positions with suicidal aggression, overwhelming professional soldiers through sheer numbers and relentless attack patterns. Yesterday's helicopter extraction mission ended in disaster when infected creatures were drawn to the noise of aircraft engines and swarmed the landing zone at Metro General Hospital. The creatures attacked the helicopters with their bare hands and teeth, causing mechanical failures and crashes that killed 17 soldiers. Their bodies added to the infection's growing numbers as the virus spread through blood contact. Federal authorities have implemented increasingly extreme containment measures as traditional methods prove useless against an enemy that never stops attacking. Military communications reveal discussions of carpet bombing the entire city center using experimental weapons systems and even tactical nuclear options. The infection shows no signs of natural decline, forcing government officials to consider solutions that would eliminate every living thing within the quarantine zone. My own situation has become increasingly precarious. The reinforced doors that protected me during gang wars cannot withstand enemies who attack continuously without rest, fear, or tactical consideration. Strange scraping sounds echo through the ventilation system as creatures mindlessly explore every possible entry point, driven by the scent of living human blood. Power grids throughout the city have failed as infected creatures damage electrical infrastructure during their mindless rampages through industrial areas. Without electricity, the remaining survivors lose refrigeration for food, communication equipment fails, and medical devices shut down. The city is reverting to primitive conditions while being hunted by monsters that attack anything that moves. The psychological impact on survivors may be worse than the physical threat. Multiple radio transmissions describe people breaking under the strain of constant fear, turning on each other as paranoia and desperation take hold. A group barricaded in the Riverside Mall had to execute one of their own members after he suffered a complete mental breakdown and tried to open their defenses, believing surrender might end their suffering. As darkness falls over Metro City, the infected seem to become more active, drawn to artificial lights that represent human activity. Their red eyes reflect illumination, creating a terrifying sight as they wander through abandoned streets in massive groups, following each other toward any signs of life. The city that once housed 800,000 people has become a hunting preserve for Daniel Mercer's creations, and we are nothing more than prey trapped in our own homes. What Victor Harlow intended as revenge against Gabriel Knox has become the destruction of everything both men claim to protect. Their war consumed their organizations, their soldiers, and now threatens to consume every innocent life in Metro City. The infection they unleashed recognizes no boundaries between criminal and civilian, adult and child, guilty and innocent. It simply destroys everything it encounters with mindless, relentless hunger. This is Ethan Ross broadcasting on day 8 of the Metro City outbreak, speaking to whoever might still be listening beyond these cursed walls. It's noon, and the sun shines down on a city of the dead where hope has become as scarce as ammunition. What I'm about to report represents the final chapter of our civilization's collapse, witnessed through the eyes of survivors who refuse to surrender even as death surrounds them with mindless persistence. The military quarantine has become an execution zone where desperate families attempting to flee are shot without warning or question. Thermal imaging reports I've intercepted show the perimeter guards have eliminated over 200 civilians in the past 48 hours. Men, women, and children cut down by machine gun fire as they approach the fence lines begging for rescue. The infection must not spread beyond our city's borders, and human life has become an acceptable sacrifice to achieve that goal. Intelligence communications reveal the true scope of our catastrophe through cold military statistics that reduce human tragedy to numbers on situation reports. Over 500,000 people lived in Metro City when this nightmare began. Current estimates suggest less than 200,000 remain alive, scattered in isolated pockets throughout the urban wasteland. The infected population has grown beyond counting, with new creatures created faster than military analysts can track their movements. The creatures themselves have become more dangerous simply through their exponentially growing numbers and relentless aggression. They travel in massive hordes drawn together by the sounds and scents of human activity, creating swarms that can overwhelm any defensive position through sheer volume of attackers. Yesterday, surveillance drones captured footage of hundreds of infected creatures following each other towards survivor strongholds, creating unstoppable waves of mindless destruction. Their use of simple objects as weapons has progressed through retained muscle memory rather than conscious thought. Multiple reconnaissance reports describe infected individuals swinging tools and debris with enhanced strength. But these actions stem from ingrained physical responses rather than tactical planning. One particularly disturbing incident involved creatures mindlessly pounding against hospital doors until their hands were nothing but bloody bone, yet they continued attacking with whatever remained functional. Oliver Kane's group in the downtown financial district has become the subject of intense military observation as perhaps the largest surviving civilian population. His daily radio broadcasts paint an increasingly desperate picture of medieval siege warfare fought against enemies that never tire or retreat. 43 people now defend multiple floors of the Mutual Insurance Building using furniture, filing cabinets, and office supplies to create barricades against creatures that attack with relentless persistence. Kane's reports reveal the creature's most terrifying quality, their complete inability to be discouraged or deterred by casualties. When defensive fire cuts down dozens of infected attackers, hundreds more continue pressing forward over the bodies of their fallen, driven by basic predatory instincts that recognize no concept of tactical retreat. Kane's group has been forced to abandon the lower floors, not due to intelligent enemy strategy, but because endless waves of creatures eventually overwhelm any position. The psychological strain on Kane's survivors has reached critical levels as they face enemies that display no human emotion or recognition. Radio transmissions capture arguments over food rationing, desperate debates about attempting escape versus waiting for rescue, and the heartbreaking sounds of children crying for parents who will never return. Kane himself sounds increasingly unstable, his once confident voice now cracking with exhaustion, as he describes watching former neighbors attack with inhuman fury. Theodore Black's defense of Lincoln Elementary School represents the last organized resistance by law enforcement personnel remaining in the city. His tactical expertise has kept 61 people alive for 8 days, but even Black's military precision cannot overcome impossible odds when facing enemies that feel no pain and fear no death. The school's gymnasium has become a fortress where families huddle together while Black coordinates defensive positions against creatures that attack with suicidal persistence. Black's radio reports detail the infected creature's mindless but relentless probing of his defenses, constantly pressing against different entry points, not through strategic planning, but because they're drawn to the sounds of human activity within the building. They've damaged electrical systems during their rampage, forcing the defenders to operate in complete darkness, while creatures with enhanced night vision launch continuous attacks driven by basic predatory instincts. The emotional weight of defending children has taken a severe toll on Black's mental state. His transmissions increasingly focus on the 16 kids under his protection, describing their frightened faces and innocent questions about when their parents will come home. Black has made the agonizing decision to save one bullet for himself, rather than allow transformation. But he struggles with the knowledge that his death would leave the children defenseless against creatures that show no mercy or human recognition. Military operations within the city have ceased entirely after the loss of 3 separate battalion-strength units to infected swarms that overwhelmed professional soldiers through pure numbers and fearless aggression. Conventional military tactics proved useless against enemies who accept unlimited casualties to reach their targets. Tank crews reported being swarmed by hundreds of infected individuals who attacked armor plating with bare hands until their fingers were ground to bone. The failed helicopter evacuation missions demonstrated the creatures' attraction to loud noises and their willingness to attack anything that moves. Infected creatures were drawn to aircraft engines like moths to flame, swarming landing zones, and attacking helicopters with such ferocity that 7 military aircraft crashed due to mechanical damage caused by hundreds of clawing hands and biting teeth. Their blood-contaminated crash sites, creating new infection vectors. Federal authorities have reached consensus on implementing the most extreme containment solution available to prevent nationwide catastrophe. Intercepted communications from Washington reveal approval for tactical nuclear deployment against Metro City's downtown core, followed by systematic carpet bombing of remaining infected populations. The decision carries unanimous support from civilian leadership and military command, despite its cost in innocent lives. Preparation for nuclear deployment involves evacuating military personnel to minimum safe distances while maintaining quarantine integrity around the blast zone. Specialized radiation detection equipment will monitor the effectiveness of atomic weapons against infected tissue, providing data for similar operations if the contagion spreads to other population centers. Metro City has become a testing ground for humanity's response to biological warfare beyond conventional military capabilities. The timeline for nuclear deployment depends on confirmation that no uninfected civilians remain alive within the target zone. Military observers continue monitoring survivor radio transmissions, but each group's inevitable silence brings the final solution closer to implementation. Oliver Kane's financial district fortress and Theodore Black's school defense represent the last obstacles preventing immediate atomic strike authorization. My own situation has deteriorated beyond any possibility of rescue or escape. Infected creatures have been drawn to the sounds of my broadcasts and are mindlessly attacking the outer security barriers with relentless persistence. Motion sensors detect massive numbers of creatures gathered outside, pounding against reinforced doors with their fists until bones break, then continuing to attack with whatever remains functional. Emergency supplies that seemed adequate for weeks of broadcasting have dwindled to perhaps 48 hours of food and water. Battery power for communication equipment will last another 60 hours maximum, after which this radio station will fall silent forever. The creatures outside have been attacking continuously for days, wearing down barriers through mindless persistence rather than intelligent planning. The infected demonstrate the terrifying efficiency of creatures driven by pure predatory instinct without human limitations like fatigue or fear. Rather than tactical patience, they display endless mechanical persistence that eventually overcomes any obstacle through sheer repetition. Their constant attacks have weakened structural supports throughout the underground complex, creating potential collapse points that no amount of engineering could prevent. Temperature sensors throughout my facility detect massive heat signatures surrounding the building, indicating hundreds or possibly thousands of infected creatures drawn to this location by the sounds of human activity. My reinforced position has become a magnet for every creature within miles, their basic predatory instincts focusing their attention on the last source of human voices in their immediate area. As afternoon shadows lengthen across our devastated city, the end approaches with mathematical certainty. Oliver Kane's ammunition will run out tonight when the endless waves finally exhaust his supply. Theodore Black's school defenses will collapse tomorrow under the weight of countless attackers, and my own position will be overrun when structural damage reaches critical failure points. The infection that began as Victor Harlow's revenge against Gabriel Knox has consumed everything both men claim to value, leaving only mindless hunger and empty buildings where a great city once thrived. This is Ethan Ross broadcasting what may be my final transmission from beneath the ruins of Metro City. Day 12 of the outbreak, 3 in the morning, and I can hear them in the walls now, clawing and scraping with mindless persistence through structural barriers that have protected me for over a week. My hands shake as I speak these words, not from fear alone, but from exhaustion and the terrible knowledge that I'm documenting humanity's failure against an enemy we created through our own ambitions. The nuclear strike authorization came through at midnight, intercepted from encrypted military channels that assumed no one remained alive to monitor their communications. Federal Command has designated Metro City as Ground Zero for tactical nuclear deployment, scheduled for dawn in approximately 3 hours. The warhead will detonate directly above the financial district, ensuring complete sterilization of the infected population while providing valuable data on atomic weapons effectiveness against biological threats. Oliver Kane's final transmission reached me 27 minutes ago, cutting through static and interference with crystal clarity that made his words more heartbreaking than any scream. His voice carried the exhaustion of a man who had fought the impossible fight and lost everything that mattered. Kane reported that infected creatures had finally broken through the weakened barricades on the 32nd floor. Their relentless pounding, having worn down furniture and debris barriers beyond repair over days of continuous assault. His last words were not pleas for rescue or curses against the fate that awaited him and his survivors. Instead, Kane spoke directly to his wife Sarah, who had evacuated to her sister's home in Denver weeks before the outbreak began. He told her about their neighbors who had died protecting children, about strangers who became family during the siege, and about ordinary people who discovered extraordinary courage when faced with mindless evil. Kane's transmission ended with gunfire and inhuman growling, followed by silence that continues as I speak. Theodore Black's school stronghold fell 6 hours ago when the infected finally overwhelmed defensive positions through sheer numbers and relentless aggression. Military thermal imaging captured the final assault as over 300 creatures converged on Lincoln Elementary School simultaneously, pressing forward over the bodies of their fallen, without any concept of retreat or self-preservation, despite suffering massive casualties from Black's coordinated fire. The gymnasium where Black made his final stand became a killing field where one police sergeant with dwindling ammunition held off an army of monsters driven by basic predatory instincts. Surveillance footage shows Black using improvised explosive devices, fighting with his service weapon until the magazine ran empty, then continuing with axes and crowbars taken from the school's maintenance department. He died as he lived, protecting innocent people from creatures that no longer possessed any trace of human mercy or recognition. Military communications reveal that the infected pose an existential threat simply due to their exponentially growing numbers and complete immunity to psychological warfare. The creatures attack anything that moves with mindless fury, feeling no pain and showing no fear of death. Their enhanced strength allows them to tear through barriers and overwhelm defensive positions through brute force and endless persistence rather than tactical thinking. They are driven by basic predatory instincts amplified to monstrous levels by Mercer's chemical modifications. The infected have destroyed communication centers throughout the city during their mindless rampages, cutting off survivors from coordination, not through strategy, but through their attraction to electrical noise and human voices. My own station represents the last functioning transmitter within the quarantine zone, drawing creatures from across the city like a beacon that calls to their basic hunting instincts. They pound against my barriers with mechanical persistence, wearing down steel and concrete through endless repetition. Reconnaissance drones have documented infected groups gathering in massive hordes around areas with heavy human presence, drawn by scent and sound rather than conscious planning. Their behavior follows simple patterns driven by predatory instincts. They move toward noise, attack anything that breathes, and continue until physically destroyed. Former construction workers retain muscle memory for swinging tools, but only in repetitive, mindless ways that serve their violent impulses without conscious thought. The most disturbing aspect of the infected involves their complete lack of human recognition or emotional response to familiar faces. Surveillance footage shows creatures attacking their own former family members with the same vicious intensity they display towards strangers, their faces showing no glimmer of recognition or hesitation. These are not people with damaged minds. They are biological weapons that wear human faces while possessing only the drive to kill and spread their infection. Federal authorities concluded that conventional containment measures cannot stop an enemy that never tires, never retreats, and reproduces exponentially with each successful attack. The infected probe quarantine barriers, not through intelligent testing, but through constant pressure from thousands of creatures mindlessly pushing against every obstacle in their path. Their persistence and growing numbers make traditional biological containment impossible using available resources and personnel. The decision to deploy nuclear weapons represents humanity's admission that we created something beyond our ability to control through conventional means. These creatures feel no pain, show no fear, and attack with relentless aggression until physically destroyed, or until they infect new victims to join their ranks. Metro City will become the first American city destroyed by atomic weapons, because we allowed scientific ambition and criminal revenge to create perfect biological destroyers. Preparation for nuclear deployment has revealed classified contingency plans for similar biological threats in other urban centers. Military documents reference prepared strike packages for major metropolitan areas, suggesting government officials have long considered scenarios requiring atomic solutions to domestic biological warfare. Metro City serves as a testing ground for protocols that may be implemented nationwide if similar outbreaks occur elsewhere. The infected creatures surrounding my position demonstrate the mindless persistence that makes them so dangerous to human survival. They pound against barriers with their fists until bones break and flesh tears away, then continue attacking with whatever remains functional. Their enhanced pain tolerance means they can sustain injuries that would incapacitate normal humans while maintaining the same level of aggressive assault. Emergency supplies that once seemed adequate for extended broadcasting have dwindled to perhaps 6 hours of remaining functionality. Battery power for communication equipment will fail before dawn, ensuring this transmission ends before nuclear deployment eliminates any possibility of future broadcasts from Metro City. My role as witness to this tragedy will conclude with atomic fire that reduces everything to radioactive ash and melted steel. The scratching sounds in the walls have intensified as infected creatures work through structural barriers using nothing but enhanced strength and mindless determination. Motion sensors detect multiple heat signatures approaching through passages they've torn open with bare hands, indicating structural damage has reached critical levels throughout the underground complex. My sanctuary has become a tomb where I await enemies who possess the strength to defeat any barrier through persistent destruction. Temperature readings throughout the facility show infected creatures have damaged areas containing building maintenance equipment and emergency supplies during their rampage through the complex. They don't understand that eliminating my power sources serves any strategic purpose. They simply destroy everything they encounter in their mindless search for living victims. Their basic predatory drive makes them perfectly suited for urban destruction without requiring any tactical intelligence. As I prepare these final words, movement in the ventilation system indicates 8's infected creatures have torn through metal barriers that were never designed to withstand superhuman strength, applied with endless persistence. The mechanical nature of their assault demonstrates no coordination between individuals working toward common objectives, but rather the simple fact that multiple creatures are all drawn to the same source of human scent and sound. The nuclear countdown proceeds regardless of my personal situation, with atomic weapons providing the only certain solution to an infection that threatens to spread beyond containment through simple exponential growth. Metro City's 800,000 residents will be remembered as casualties of human ambition and scientific hubris that created enemies beyond our ability to defeat through conventional military force. My final message goes to anyone listening from beyond these cursed walls. Learn from our tragedy and never allow ambition to override ethics in scientific research. Daniel Mercer's brilliance became our destruction because he pursued knowledge without considering the consequences of creating perfect biological weapons. The infection consuming Metro City could spread to any community where criminals seek ultimate revenge and scientists abandon moral limitations for personal advancement. The approaching dawn will bring nuclear fire that reduces our city to atomic wasteland. But the lessons of Metro City must survive to prevent similar tragedies. Remember that the greatest monsters are not created in laboratory accidents or alien invasions, but through human choices that prioritize power over principles and revenge over responsibility. We created our own destroyers through greed, hatred, and the arrogance to believe we could control forces beyond human comprehension. The steel doors of my broadcasting room are buckling under sustained assault from creatures who possess the enhanced strength to tear through reinforced barriers using nothing but mindless persistence and superhuman physical capability. They have found me at last. These former humans transformed into perfect killing machines by scientific ambition and criminal revenge. As their claws tear through metal and their red eyes reflect my emergency lighting, I can hear something that chills me more than my approaching death. They are not just mindlessly attacking my position. In the chaos of their assault, I can hear them responding to something else. Distant sounds that shouldn't exist in this dead city. Vehicle engines, helicopter rotors, human voices shouting coordinated commands. Either I'm hallucinating from exhaustion and terror, or someone else has entered Metro City just hours before the nuclear strike reduces everything to ash.